project. And so they were, of course, seeking for a medical scientist. Actually, they were seeking for a nutritionist, but it was so frustrating to look at all these projects being built with just, based on one discipline. And the reason why I actually applied for that position initially is that my family back in those days ran a trucking company, a big company, and we were employing many truckers. And I had been kind of observing them all throughout my childhood and youth, and thinking that, oh no, these medical scientists at our institute, they will never be able to promote any healthy eating habits among those folks. So in a way, it was just out of curiosity when I sent them the application for the researcher position, to kind of make them think and realize that there are also other points of view into this matter. And I was truly shocked when I got the position, because I wasn't sure at all whether I want to work in the, field of medicine. But that's how it went. And for almost 15 years, I stayed at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, where I learned to combine the fields of anthropology, other social sciences, nutrition, and very clinical medicine field. So, and I can say that the beginning was not easy. I was the first ever non-medical scientist employed by that institute ever, and my treatment was accordingly. The elderly professors of medicine did not even greet me in the hallways when they met me, because they thought that it was so utterly wrong that I had been employed there, and that resources were wasted in this field of cultural anthropology and whatnot. But little by little, I think things changed, because first of all, building a common language took a long time. I was in a very junior position, so I didn't have much power to influence over the others, but I basically just started taking my turn and learning to speak, even when I was often, shall I say, maybe silenced would be the correct word. So I think that's kind of a key message number one, that often interdisciplinary researchers, and I didn't realize I was being one, not at all. They are often very alone, and especially in such junior positions, aiming to write their PhD thesis or whatever, it's often much easier to kind of oblige and start doing what you are said to do. But maybe it was this background from my family company that I realized that no, these people are just wrong. I know better, and I will say it. And because I wasn't so fond of the job either, so I wasn't even afraid of being kicked out of the project. And what happened in the end, it was a 5-year project, and we actually got the prize of the best health promotion project conducted in Finland on that decade. So the results were massive, just because we asked the truck drivers what they would like to do themselves, how they could change their habits, what are the circumstances, I mean, what's possible in their occupation and what's not, and all these. So, I mean, not very difficult things. And these were, none of these were things that the medical scientists couldn't have asked or done themselves, right? But they never came to think of that. And I think that's like the message number two. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, so you don't come to think of what you don't know. So that's where you need the integrators or facilitators, or whatever you would need to call them. But it was a rough path, and I hope it's much easier these days. And some years later, I think the same institute, which is not my current employer, so I'm not referring to the University of Oulu, started also employing other fields of science. So not only anthropologists or medical scientists, but also, for example, psychologists and environmental scientists, and from many different fields. So I think something changed there. But after having conducted a couple of these occupational health promotion projects, I sort of had it, since I'm quite interested on the meta level of doing things, so not so interested in how shall we actually conduct this and this type of research, and how should we involve, for example, citizens in this and do this and that. It kind of starts repeating itself. So I was more interested in how we could pass such meta level skills to all researchers so that we could learn to better collaborate with each other. So I applied for a position at the University of Oulu, which is my current employer, and I've been here for the past 5 years, located in the Unit for Strategy and Science Policy, where I have my own team called Policies and Practices. So it sounds like a very grandiose team that we are like implementing policies and practices all over our organization. Well, that's what we're supposed to do, but obviously we are a team of 6 persons, so we cannot do miracles. But we are there to help people and kind of like assist them in learning new ways of thinking. And I think it goes on 3 different levels. We always need to promote things at like environmental and organizational level. So it's not enough to enhance researchers' personal skills. You also need to try and change things at the organizational level. And then we also need to have a lot of community actions available so that these interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches that we have get a lot of attention, because all researchers want to get acknowledgement and attention to their research. So we want to make everything very, very visible what we do, even though it's not always such big things. But I think these 3 levels, this environment and organization and community, and then of course the personal level, are all equally important. So that was my probably a little bit chaotic sounding story, but I guess doing interdisciplinarity is always a bit chaotic. So hope you got the idea.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. I think we would be hard pressed to find anyone's story here that isn't a little bit chaotic. I'd be really interested to hear if anyone had like a really nice linear story to where they are now. I'd be curious to see what that would be like. Thank you for sharing all that. What an interesting journey, and the trucker study. That's such a cool kind of entry point there, and what a great way of thinking about it, and of finally coming to the conclusion that actually you do actually know what you're talking about, and other people are likely wrong.
It was so funny. For 10 years,
yeah.
10 years, I was really famous among the Finnish truck drivers. So they were always greeting me at gas stations and everywhere. And this was much to my family's amusement.
What a legacy. All right, Stephanie, if you would tell us a little bit about your journey.
Okay, so just to let you know, what I'm currently doing with my computer is continuously pressing one moment, please, on my reboot warning on my computer. So if you hear a clicking sound in the background, it's my finger that is trying to not reboot my computer. It's such bad luck. Anyways, I'm also not sure what my bio said because my computer was shutting down, but I am an architect and an urbanist from South Africa. And my transdisciplinary career came from urbanism, and urbanism is such a transdisciplinary field, especially because a lot of the kinds of projects that you work on are very practical and applied research and project-based research. And so for my PhD, I did a project on public lighting and the impact of lighting on everyday life in South African informal settlements. And here I was working with a very diverse group of several NGOs, of community-based organizations and like leadership committees, as well as the community, government officials, and then based in an interdisciplinary group where we were collaborating to implement this project in South Africa. And that was sort of where this role of my transdisciplinary expertise came in, and where I started really focusing on being a TD researcher. And already then, you know, you're integrating so many different aspects and moving parts into one single project, which is to implement some solar lights, which sounds so basic, but after all, that takes an incredible amount of maneuvering and somehow bringing things together, including lots of different kinds of knowledge together, because what is public lighting? What field does that lie in even? So from there, I became, I pursued a postdoc position at the University of Bristol, where I was in the role of looking at the quite a large scale consortium of transdisciplinary consortium, looking at public health and the impact that urban planning decision making has on public health. And my role here was quite a short role. It was a maternity cover position that I took on. And I had the specific goal of doing course correction in the project. So understanding where the researchers are at. It was like 2 years into the project. So where the researchers are at, what is going wrong, what is going right, and how can they better work together. And so really integrating also their perspectives, their different viewpoints, and also understanding how incredibly challenging it is for people to somehow coexist with their perspectives and their opinions and their definitions of things. And yeah, that role led me to the current position that I'm in at the moment, which is at the Transdisciplinarity Lab at ETH. And here I'm based within Bianca Vieni Baptista's group, and I'm representing her here today, actually. And her group is called the Cultural Studies of Science and Technology. And I'm working on 2 different projects there. Both of them are modeling projects. The one is focused more on Swiss energy transitions. And there I am trying to nourish and foster the community of practice of social science and humanities researchers within this field. So there again, how to integrate all of these different disciplines and perspectives, and how to kind of maintain and flourish that community of practice. And then on the other hand, I'm working on a modeling project on integrated assessment models, which is like large climate models, trying to advise policymakers on their different policies for climate action. And here there are about 70 different researchers working on that project across 19 organizations across the whole of Europe. And my role there is with Bianca is to lead the co-design work package, where we are guiding and facilitating the entire co-design process to improve these models with the stakeholders. And so that's also a very integrator focused role. That's all for my bio for now. One other thing that I'm also doing, which is still quite largely integrator sort of focused, is from my PhD, I'm still part of a community of practice for public lighting, where we're still all kind of trying to work together to have impact on policy for public lighting in informal settlements, because at the moment there is no policy for public lighting in informal settlements in South Africa. So this is also a large focus, and I know that InReach is quite focused on developing a community of practice for these sorts of interdisciplinary, integrated, transdisciplinary types of researchers. And so for me, it's really interesting to understand how communities of practice work and how they can really help develop these sort of lost fields that we're in, right? That we don't know where we stand and we don't really know where we belong, but rather that we sort of start to belong in a problem-focused sort of community where it doesn't matter what discipline you're part of, but rather what your focus is on you know, the kind of area that you're researching on. So that's it for me. Still clicking.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, your comment or question, what even is public lighting? What discipline is that? You know, I think that just captures so much of what all of us are working with here. Now it's just this completely flipping things around so that, you know, you really can't come at anything from one angle, and it does require this integration of so many different perspectives. And you are both here, and everyone here in this community is trying to develop and communicate the value of that expertise. So speaking of kind of building up a culture of recognition and appreciation and visibility for these kinds of roles. I was wondering if you would both speak to what your experience has been in your respective institutions, and maybe even if you want to connect it to anything going on in Europe as a whole, for what might be pushing forward the recognition and uncovering the need for these integrator careers in these very inter and transdisciplinary efforts that are problem focused on things like climate change, for example.
Shall I go? Oh,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
No, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for the University of Oulu, I think the real change started back in 2005 when the European Commission adopted this European Charter for Researchers and made a code of conduct for the recruitment of researchers. So these two documents kind of challenge the universities as researchers' employers to start boosting researchers' careers. And that's, of course, a very large topic, but as part of it, it kind of made visible that especially inter and transdisciplinary researchers have it hard there due to the assessment, the ways that the assessments are done. And I'm not saying that this is a new thing. Like I said, this is already back in 2005, and we're still very much in the progress. So things change quite slowly. But recently, there has been some really major changes. For example, there's this recommendation for the responsible evaluation of a researcher in Finland, which has this European background. And this recommendation is just 4 years old. And it actually states very boldly that we have to realize the differences between disciplines in, for example, publishing and citation practices, and interdisciplinarity must be taken into account. So we must tailor the assessment practices, and one size does not fit all cases. So it means that research and researchers must be assessed as representatives of their own field of research, so they cannot, for example, be compared with each other. This has happened a lot in Europe. I don't know what the situation is in the US, and therefore the suitability of the indicators used and any possible disciplinary biases should be really explicitly acknowledged. So this is, of course, much easier said than done. But to make this happen, we have, for example, built and started using narrative CVs. And these narrative CVs asks you to explain, I mean, not so much what you have done or achieved, but rather how shall I say, how your work and activities have contributed to your field, to the research teams, or to the development of others, and to wider research and innovation. We have, of course, then come across some other problems, that how will we then assess these narrative CVs, and how will we treat them responsibly, and how will we actually cross-check that these contributions that the researchers state are actually valid. But there are ways to do that. We have built a matrix for that. So, but I'm saying that this work is just starting now. So for a long time, we were looking for recruitments who would, for people that were recruiting new researchers into their teams, that would they like to test this matrix and the narrative CV, and nobody kind of dared. But I think now, little by little, people have realized that okay, we can actually do that, and we cannot anymore look for age indexes or whatever it is that people are doing when they are Googling the scholars that are applying for positions. So this is a major change, and it's happening all throughout Europe, but it's very, very slow. Like said, the initiative dates already back to 2005. And I think that many US organizations have also actually committed to something like this, because you have signed the what is it called, the DORA Declaration. So actually the DORA Declaration also states that you should pay attention to the differences in between disciplines and start building these tenure promotion um, activities in a different manner. And European Commission has, of course, been able to boost this at the EU level, because many researchers want to be able to apply for European funding. So also our university has been awarded with the European Commission's HR Excellence in Research Quality label, which is a recognition for developing the career path towards these kind of practices. And they are actually in the European Union funding proposals these days asking about this. But this narrative CV and building this matrix has taken a long time. Yes, thanks for sharing the DORA declaration link. But I think there are other challenges. So we can only do this much at the organizational level. But then at the country level and how the universities are assessed. In Finland, for example, our Ministry of Education and Culture, which we are very, very dependent on because we get most of our funding from them, and then only like a smaller share comes from external competitive funding sources. So they still assess universities with very, very traditional, shall we say, kind of metrics. So they look at where we publish, whether they are the highest ranking journals and how much we publish. So, for example, simple numerics. And when we know that inter and transdisciplinary research often takes a longer path to build the research projects before they end up as publications, and then they may not be published in such high-ranking journals because the journals are very discipline-based. So this is a problem. So now that we are going through this change, it may mean that we will take some hits from the ministry level or from the European level, because for a while, for example, our publication amounts may drop. So there are a lot of questions, and we are facing the universities in Finland have to conduct research assessment exercise every 6 years. It's written in the law here. So we are facing our next research assessment in a year or so, and my team is now preparing for that. And it's a hard time finding good metrics that would be very that we could use without doing a lot of handpicking and tailoring when we are assessing the entire university. So the indicators, of course, must be very well working. So I'm not saying that it's that people are somehow not willing to pay attention to these things, but it's also not that easy, because we cannot have everything as a narrative. We cannot provide our external international evaluators thousands and thousands of pages of narratives saying what we are doing. So we are maybe facing the challenge of developing together, I hope, with the global community, some new type of metrics.
And thank you. You've really hit on some of the central challenges that I think we face as a profession, but also, and in speaking to you before, I'm not sure you realize just how much you have actually put out there that feels like significant progress, or something that is really pushing the profession forward. And I think there's so much in what you just said that we could all latch onto and talk about for a whole day. So maybe we can consider some takeover sessions or something to expand on some of the conversations here. I know there were a couple of chat questions. I want to just hold off and let Stephanie also kind of speak to this idea of institutional supports and kind of what you're doing within the institutional framework to make the integrator visible.
Yeah, so I mean, Switzerland is well known for its role in transdisciplinarity and supporting transdisciplinary research, you know, stemming from its focus on sustainability studies. And so that is already, we're already very lucky in that regard, that we've got quite a lot of support and organizations that really back transdisciplinary research and integration being such an essential central role in TD. And then so within the, I mean, I'm based in the Department of Environmental System Science, and then within that the sustainability unit. And within that, they've been funding the Transdisciplinarity Lab for many years now, since 2011, if I remember correctly. And that has, after, I think the evaluation is happening in 1 or 2 years' time, and after that the Transdisciplinarity Lab has the opportunity to become a permanent professorship. So already that is quite an important step forward in terms of making transdisciplinary researchers and integrators within that, you know, much more recognized roles in research. And within the department's strategy document, they've really started including the kinds of wording that they use. And we're also really challenging them and trying to force them to include wording that speaks to these roles that we play that, you know, are across borders and boundaries and translating and all these sorts of concepts that we speak about when we speak about integration roles. But then more specifically, Bianca Vieni Baptista and Sabina Hoffman, they are co-leading a course that I'm also contributing to called Integration. So that's really great. And here they are teaching students the different concepts and theories of integration. First of all, giving them a foundation of transdisciplinary research, but then going into what is an integrator, what is integration as a concept, and then teaching them some methods and tools of integration, and different kinds of roles and competencies of someone who is an integrator, who takes that role, and then also some challenges and opportunities of such a role. And the course is broken down into 2 parts, where first it's the kind of conceptual theoretical dimensions that are explained, and with that some great papers that have been written recently, for example by Christian Pohl and his colleagues, called conceptualizing transdisciplinary integration, you know, as a multi-dimensional interactive process. And there they look at what exactly is integration, how does it work. But also another paper that Sabina wrote with her colleagues that I really enjoy. It's this paper. I can also post these papers on the chat if my computer allows me to. But Integrating the Integrator is another paper that really speaks about what is an integrator really. And so these sorts of things are being brought into the course in the first part. And in the second part, we're doing a case study approach where we have 3 different projects, one of them being the Diamond project that I'm working on. Yes, I see that you, if I don't manage to share it, I'm going to email it because I'm still with my finger on my reboot button. And so the second part is a case study approach, where we look at presenting these different projects that are that have these integrator roles within the project, as the first part. And then the second part of the case study is actually applying a method, so teaching the students. For example, the Diamond case study, I used a joint problem framing approach, and I had a workshop session with the students on how to do joint problem framing, and they all got different sticky notes with different perspectives, and they had to kind of merge their perspectives, and at the end of the day integrate all these perspectives into a jointly framed problem statement. And I was actually incredibly surprised at how well the students managed. So perhaps this is also something interesting to consider, that, you know, as our ideas of disciplines and boundaries and all these things start to change, I think the younger generation are so ready for that. They don't have these straitjacketed viewpoints that we do on where you belong and what you define yourself as, etc., etc. So I think that's something promising as well, to see the younger generations really ready for such such blurred roles, let's say, rather focusing again on a problem rather, and who cares if you define yourself as a geographer or a sociologist? No one cares as long as you are working towards solving a single research question or problem, whatever it may be. So yeah, that's it. Oh, and then another thing that the course really encourages is collective reflexivity, which is really great. So they have to fill out a rubric cube that looks at the different case studies and analyzes them all, and they have to think about that. And then also personal reflexivity, where they have to write a journal throughout the course. And that really forces them to kind of think about these personal and interpersonal competencies that are so important in a role as an integrator. That's me.
Thank you, Stephanie. Well, I realize we probably only have about 10 more minutes, and I do want to give people a chance to ask some questions and see if there is something that we need to follow up with in a separate conversation. But I know that Anne and Stephanie, you didn't get a chance to share nearly as much as you had to offer in this area. And so I just want to give you the opportunity to maybe share one final thought that feels really important to you to bring up as maybe something that could be discussed as a community moving forward, or just something that you want to get out there. So Stephanie, you're unmuted. Do you just want to keep on the roll and let us know what thoughts you have kind of that are coming to the forefront?
Yeah, that's difficult. Maybe I'll bring up a challenge. And that's what we also spoke about in our previous call. Because in an integrator role, you're touching everything at the same time, and you're a little bit involved in everybody's business, which can be quite intimidating for researchers. They don't really like, that you're getting into their research, and everybody's a little bit, and this is an issue, I think, with academia and specifically with publishing. And this is probably why integrator roles work and function way better in practice outside of academia, because people don't care about publishing. And so the issue is a little bit, you contribute to integrating these different perspectives and different knowledge, and you make people aware of different viewpoints and perspectives. But at the end of the day, when they publish, you're often not included as an author. Which is fine. I mean, if publishing didn't matter, and if publications didn't matter for your CV and for your career as an academic, do we mind not being included? We can also just write papers on integration and these sorts of things. But so that's for me a bit of a question, an open-ended question. It's what role does an integrator then play in the publication process when they have managed to integrate all these different disciplines together? Do they then just step away and walk away? Or for me, I'm still stuck with this often and not knowing really how to deal with it. At the moment, I just continue to share and integrate and everything. And if I don't get included in a publication, it's okay. I move on from it. But it is an open question.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anne, do you have a final thought or point you want to bring up?
Sure, just to comment quickly to Stephanie that I think that's kind of against research ethics not to include one. Maybe this could be a much further, much larger discussion, but in a way, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you don't want to be included, that's a different set, but just leaving you out this sounds strange. Probably happens in our university as well. But as a final note, I'd say that if you have the chance, if your universities, institutes, whatever are going to update its strategies, please participate. I know that researchers very often feel that, oh, I don't want to, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But if you are
I'm gonna have a
asked
meeting
to,
at 1.
if you are requested to contribute to strategy update, if researchers are asked for opinions or whatever, please share them, because actually we updated our strategy last fall. It's valid from the beginning of this year. And I actually wrote there into the vision, we are a front runner in interdisciplinary cooperation. And that's what it says. No one took it away. So I guess we are now really going to promote this even better, which is of course really good because, like I wrote into the chat, the vice director for research, who has been our biggest promoter in doing what we are doing, is going to retire next year, and we have been a bit worried that what will happen then, because as you probably all know, you will need the support of at least one of your high leaders to be able to do what you are doing. So now that it's there in the strategy, and I guess we will not update it at least, well, not next year at least. So I can always refer to the strategy. So things get much more smoother when you are very much in the core of the strategy. So that's my tip to you.
All right. Thank you, Anne. Well, we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to give people a chance to voice their, give voice to their most pressing questions. So feel free to unmute and ask a question, or put a question in the chat, and we may or may not be able to get to it now, but could potentially follow up after we close out the webinar for today. So a question from Tanya, and again, you're welcome to unmute. Oh, she was asking if everyone was familiar with, it looks like a certain resource, Foresight Personal Thinking Profile. Calls for breakthrough thinking, a blend of insight, imagination, analysis, and action. I personally have not heard of that one.
No one has any questions, then can I advertise our AIS 2025 conference shortly?
Yeah, we did actually get a question in the chat. Marie-France had asked, I'm curious to know how researchers recognize the need to ask some help for the service of facilitators.
Oh, they don't.
They don't.
I mean, you cannot. That cannot be expected. I think that's why we do a lot of community level actions, organize a lot of events, and do a lot of knowledge building in that way, so that people would realize that, okay, there are 8 faculties within our university, and dozens and dozens of different disciplines, and many of them are actually researching similar topics. So but to make this easier, we have actually built a program for advanced level postdocs. We call it a science leadership program. So not an interdisciplinary science leadership program, but simply a science leadership program. It's 10 credit program. It lasts for an entire year, and there we actually provide them with all kinds of tools and help them to help them to learn how to create new and interesting ideas and initiatives together with others, so that they could build interdisciplinary research projects, and also learn how to lead an interdisciplinary project, because then you must realize that you cannot master all the fields that are present in your team, and you have to kind of trust more the others and be humble and leave your ego at the doorstep. So that takes training and skills. So we've actually built a program for that. So it's to strengthen everyone's knowledge, skills, and capabilities. So there are, of course, ways, but they will never come and ask you. No. I mean, if we'd stay waiting that, we could sit in our offices all day long and wait for researchers, and they'd never show up.
I mean, from my side, what I can say is that large funding bodies like Horizon Europe, which is the funding body for the Diamond project that I'm working on, they are creating these roles. And it's not that the team necessarily believes in the role or even understands what the role is. And so it is an opportunity when you do have these large funders who say, oh, we have to do TD and we have to do integration and co-creation and co-design, all these buzzwords, that we can somehow take the opportunity to transform those buzzwords into something that our fellow researchers can buy into and see the value of. So there's a big responsibility, and it's quite intimidating, actually, that responsibility that lies with you to kind of try and convince your colleagues that this is important. But at the same time that we're still experimenting here. So we still have to make mistakes and mess up the integration process and say, oh, I didn't do this properly. And then you risk, if you don't do things properly, that your colleagues don't buy into the process. So it's a bit, it's a challenge, but I think that these are the opportunities where we can really show how important these roles are. I posted the literature, by the way. I thankfully managed to do that with my bad computer, but there's some recommendations there that you can read.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, and everyone take a look in the chat. There are all kinds of resources going up there right now. Well, we have a few more minutes until the end of the session in case anyone else wants to pipe up and get some more information out of Anne and Stephanie. Please feel free to unmute and ask. So there are a lot of questions going up for how to find job titles for integrator roles and defining and so this part of it was the focus of this particular series is we wanted to find people who were explicitly doing this work and that it was explicit in their job description that they needed to have and apply some level of interdisciplinary integration expertise. And so if you kind of go back over the course of webinars that we've done on this topic, you'll find some of those titles. There are also a few efforts to identify the titles of these roles and to develop competencies around and training programs that speak to the development of these roles. And so maybe Christine, if you are on and available to talk right now, you might be willing to speak to those efforts a little bit. You're, I think, somewhat connected to at least a couple of them.
Yeah, thank you. There are, I know, some in the ITD Alliance group on integration experts and expertise. There are some interesting efforts to list these roles out. There was an early listing of different jobs that Pips Veazey actually pulled together for her dissertation work from work by Holly Falk-Krasinski earlier in the Nordup years. So there have been some historical efforts to pull together databases of job descriptions, but in those times, those early days, it was quite overlapped with research development professionals, which are super important to this, but are not exactly the same thing as this like in-team integrator. So all that is to say there's lots of shout outs to be given to people who have started this, but there is not a pool of job descriptions. And one thing we've talked about in the InterReach website over the years is maybe collecting those, somehow crowdsourcing them to just put them up. And in the meantime, people can just kind of keep sharing them to the listserv and keep each other aware, because every time you have a solid example, somebody else can copy, and several of us have done so in our real life hires. Thanks, Emily.
Okay, well, thank you so much to Anne and Stephanie for joining us today and for being up for just telling us about your experiences and bringing up all of these this food for thought. So we will see you hopefully for the InterReach takeover on the 28th, and then again next month for our last webinar of the series. And we'll be sending out more information about that in the next couple of weeks. All right, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, or go to sleep. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.